let's get the show on the road. Where we're going, we don't need roads.
He's done it. He's done it again. He's done it again. He's here all night.
Thank you.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. I just need a really quick wee-wee, then we'll crack on.
I need to do a wee-wee. Yeah.
I did my wee-wee.
Hello and welcome to the podcast Off Radar. That's what we are.
You sure about that, Smith?
I'm James Smith. I'm joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
Did that on purpose. Having a little sip. And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige. Now, if you've not listened to one of these ones before, this is how it works. So normally we pick a film and we go away, watch it and review it. But we also do a few actors or directors as well. So we've done Cameron Diaz, Jim Carrey, Leonardo DiCaprio so far, I think.
I think that's all.
And today we're going to do Michael J. Fox, who is a Canadian-American retired actor. And at the time of recording this podcast is 61 years old. Now,
wow.
Nige, you recommended we talk about the Fox. What did you kind of first get introed to him in growing up?
That's a very good question. I honestly can't remember whether or not it was one of the Back to the Future films or whether it was actually Teen Wolf that I watched first.
Oh, wow, okay.
They were both released sort of around a similar time. In fact, Teen Wolf was catapulted into success off the back of Back to the Future because they very cleverly decided to release it afterwards, and the fact it was not very good by their standards originally when they first made it. It was a bit of a silly throwaway film. But yeah, I remember growing up and just wanting to be Michael J. Fox. I think there's a lot of kids from our generation that felt that. Certainly those that aren't the tallest in the world, which I am not. So that's another reason to tie into it. I remember when I was in primary school, actually, there was like almost like a touring book fair type thing that came round, and I remember getting this Back to the Future 2 book and just being like, this is the best thing ever. I think I've still got that book as well. And again, just that sort of tie into Michael J. Fox and so many of his films over the years I watched, and I always just felt a real attachment to the characters he played and that kind of the charm, the humour, the Michael J. Fox package, essentially. Like, always been a huge fan. And when you gave me an opportunity to choose someone we could talk about, he was always going to be very high on my list.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Eatock, do you have a recollection of your intro to...
I think, like Nige, it was, again, I can't quite remember if it was Back to the Future or Teen Wolf, but I'm going to remember, the first time I remember him being very prominent on my TV screen was he was in... I want to say it was a Pepsi advert, and it was like a proper famous at the time Pepsi advert where he goes out in the rain and he goes up a blooming side of the building, and it's all just to get a can of Pepsi.
You okay in there?
Here's your Diet Pepsi.
That must be my roommate, Danny.
Danny?
Hi, I'm Danielle. You got another Diet Pepsi?
Sure.
It was one of the first adverts I remember was seeing a Hollywood actor. You knew who Michael J. Fox was, but he was doing a Pepsi commercial. You know, nowadays it's almost commonplace to see actors and comedians or whatever doing adverts. But back then it was like, oh, wow, this is like a Hollywood star. So, yeah, it was that. And, I'd say Back to the Future and kind of Teen Wolf.
It's funny, when I was growing up, I was probably quite young when I first saw Back to the Future, and I do remember this really vividly, that there's obviously a part in Back to the Future where Marty McFly's hand starts to vanish, where he's playing on stage, where he gets like wiped from existence. And as a very young kid, I didn't know what was going on and just like started crying and ran out of the room. And my dad was like, "No, you got to watch it." And I was like, No, I don't understand. And I just didn't get this concept that he was disappearing.
You still
go every time. But obviously, like many people of our age, like I became a massive fan of Back to the Future, but also Michael J. Fox in general. Back to the Future in general, like I've watched that. Obviously, I've said it on the podcast before so many times. Probably my most watched film ever.
I've probably seen it twice.
Oh wow, okay. I've seen it so many. So I went to the Royal Albert Hall. I saw it with not with the Philharmonic Orchestra. The Philharmonic Orchestra were playing. I think I mentioned
Philharmonic.
Yeah. I also went to the Secret Cinema, which was
I remember you doing that,
which was amazing. I've seen the musical, which was a lot of fun. But yeah, Back to the Future was, and I remember as a kid, me and my friend Ben getting really carried away with it, that we used to get his skateboard and almost try and attach
break the 88
attach ourselves to a car, hold a car,
blue truck,
hold that. And also the Michael J. Fox 360 run, when he runs and does a 360 turn, I used to kind of mimic that as I was running.
That's Calvin Klein. Oh my God, he's a dream. Whoa, kid, stop. Hey! Boy. I'll get it back to you, all right?
Wow, look at him go!
It's funny that you say Teen Wolf came out. So Teen Wolf was made pretty much at the same time as Back to the Future, but they released it a year after, you say, Nigel?
Yeah, well, it was the same year, really, but it was due to be released before. But for whatever reason, obviously Back to the Future came out and they were like, oh my goodness, he's an absolute megastar, let's get this out. And Teen Wolf did a hell of a lot better than it would have done if it had been released before, because his star power at that point was absolutely insane. Like, that was a film that cost $4 million to make and made 80.
Oh, wow.
So that goes to show how big a star Michael J. Fox was at that time, because there's no one really of note in it. It wasn't really directed by anyone. There wasn't really that much going for it. I mean, if you sort of go back and watch the film, his character, like, compared to, say, An American Werewolf in London, it's very sort of almost like cartoony in terms of it, like the style. I remember there's a line where he's like, I want a keg of beer, and his eyes glow red, and it's just like, it's all very silly.
Give me a keg of beer.
And like, critically it got panned largely, but it's that great sort of teenager, sort of young adult type film where it's just very silly, like surfing on top of the car.
It's probably the kind of film, if you watch for the first time now, you'd go, oh, that's pretty shit. But if you watched it as a kid and enjoyed it, or younger, I
remember one scene
to it.
One scene in Teen Wolf that would never fly these days anyway, and I don't think it should have flown in the 1980s, when his friend is more worried about him being a homosexual than a werewolf, which is...
I forgot about that. I know there's where he has like sex with an actress as a werewolf as well, which is a bit weird. He cheats on his girlfriend to have sex with like the cheerleader or something.
Well,
it's very strange.
It's kind of like 1980s. Yeah, there was a few...
Revenge of the Nerds, where you like...
Yeah, that's what I was going to do. That's what I was going to do. Yeah. Oh, don't worry. It's in a madcap comedy. It's like, I think that does classify as rape.
There was a sequel to Teen Wolf as well. Teen Wolf 2, starring Jason Bateman. And he's like his cousin or something. But there was also a cartoony talk, which I'm surprised you've not already mentioned.
I was just about to say, there was a cartoon of Teen Wolf and Back to the Future. So
Of course there was, yeah.
Yeah.
Every Michael J. Fox one.
Michael J. Fox, yeah.
And there was also one of Casualty War.
And Secret of My Success as well.
Secret of My Success.
Well, Secret of My Success was, I remember watching that and, like probably late 90s. And that was like, I don't know, at the time it was a very charming film. And Michael J. Fox was basically playing a very kind of similar kind of comic nice guy character. In fact, that's a good point. Like in pretty much every Michael J. Fox film, he's very nice. You never.
He's just Michael J. Fox.
He is, but even so, Teen Wolf is quite a good example actually, because in that there is a moment in that film where he turns into a bit of a dick, where he's the wolf, and everyone's like, "Oh, you've changed," but then he comes back at the end and becomes that down to earth nice guy that we're so used to seeing him as.
Like Doc Hollywood at the start of that, he's basically going to be a plastic surgeon, and he's almost a bit like a sleazy 80s 90s guy. So yeah, but there's always that core of who he is. He always learns how to be Michael J. Fox by the end of the film, it seems, largely anyway.
I was looking at his filmography, and I was like, yep, Back to the Future, seen that. Teen Wolf, seen that. Secret of My Success, vaguely remember seeing that.
It's got Supergirl in as well.
Yeah, Helen Slater.
His love interest. Yeah,
Helen Slater. Because for some reason, I still remember. I must have seen this when I was probably in my early teens. I remember seeing that, and does he sleep with her and then realizes they're related? This is going.
No. So he sleeps with her, but he's also slept with his auntie, which he didn't.
His
realize.
auntie. That's the scene.
A woman that looks like Bette Midler, but isn't Bette Midler. It's Margaret Whitton,
not his blood auntie, by the way.
No.
But then Supergirl's sleeping with his uncle, so it's like a really weird, like hodgepodge of weird sex. And there's actually quite a good scene where they're in this big mansion. They're all trying to sneak in each other's bedrooms because they're all trying to get it on with each other.
Oh.
It's a much better film than you probably remember.
Dad, I'm going to do this on my own.
But you did make it a round-trip ticket.
Yeah, I'm not going to need it. Now, when I come back to Kansas, I'm coming back in my own jet.
Take this. It's Uncle Howard's phone number in New York.
Got an uncle in New York?
After that, I never saw Doc Hollywood. I didn't see a lot of the films. The next film I saw, me and my friends went to the cinema. So this was, around about 90, I guess 96, 97, whenever this film I'm about to talk about came out. And we loved it. The Frighteners.
Yes.
Yeah, Peter Jackson's
Peter Jackson, obviously Bobby Zemeckis producer as well. Teaming back up with after Back to the Future.
Bobby Zamora.
Bobby Zamora. So, I remember we went to see that film, and it was one of those almost like, I still remember when my friends and I went to see Pulp Fiction. We didn't know much about, one of my friends knew about Tarantino, and we sat there, and the first thing we did was like, oh my God, it's John Travolta, who we only knew from Grease. With this film, The Frighteners...
Only knew him from Look Who's Talking, come on.
No, not really. But with this film, we kind of sat down and, your name is... Oh, Michael J. Fox is in this. I remember him as, Back to the Future and Teen Wolf. And then the film gets going, and we loved, and I've rewatched it probably once and still enjoyed The Frighteners.
There has been a destructive force unleashed on this town such as I have never seen.
Oh my God, I don't believe this is not happening!
We have got a poltergeist!
Okay, well, folks, I can do a clearance, but it's not going to be cheap. Although I do offer a 6-month guarantee.
I think that was a real surprise cult film.
Yeah,
but also,
definitely.
like, when you look at the other films that he'd done at that point, most of the well-known ones that you've said, like, but The Frighteners is quite a different film for him to undertake.
Yeah.
And Peter Jackson, obviously, his career has been kind of bizarre. So before that, he was, he did like those kind of crazy ones like Bad Taste and those stupid ones. And then, like The Frighteners, obviously he's gone on to do Lord of the Rings, and then like the Beatles documentary. He's done such a range of films. But yeah, The Frighteners was, for me, I remember watching that on VHS. The only reason I bought it was because Michael J. Fox was in it, because it had that Fox appeal. And I was like, I'll give it a go. And I was really surprised at that. I mean, it probably appeals to us in the sense of that kind of almost that Ghostbusters type horror comedy.
Definitely.
But, like in a kind of, slightly, 10 years later than Ghostbusters. So, and yeah, it's just a really fun film from what I remember.
Well, Jackson originally pitched it to Zemeckis as a TV show, a bit like Tales from the Crypt.
Oh, wow.
And he sort of convinced them to turn it into a movie. And you can notice as well, there's a lot of sort of callbacks and references to kind of like classic 80s horror. So like Jeffrey Combs is in it, who was at that time most famous for being in the Reanimator films. Also, Dee Wallace as well, who was really kind of well known for being in The Howling, The Hills Have Eyes. She was also the mother in like E.T. She sort of rocks up in it. And there's obviously like a little bit more out there. There's like the army guy from Full Metal Jacket as well, like the drill sergeant. Yeah, he's like a ghost in it. There's loads of like really cool sort of callbacks. And I think for Michael J. Fox at that period of his career, as you said, he had a really long deal with one of the major studios where he kind of just churned out sort of romantic comedy type films, the likes of Doc Hollywood, For Love or Money as well. I think The Hard Way may have been part of that, which was a little bit slightly different to that. But even so, it was of a genre. Frighteners for him was a real sort of change of pace, and a lot of people I've spoken to just don't understand The Frighteners. They're like, but it's a horror film and it's got Michael J. Fox in, that doesn't work. And I feel like they kind of missed the point entirely. And I'm a huge fan of The Frighteners. I think it's a really great film. I think it might have been Peter Jackson's first like American funded film, albeit it was still shot primarily in New Zealand, and there's a lot of like, you can tell like the locations are very much like beautiful part of New Zealand as well. So,
I remember like we saw that, and at the same time, or maybe just after, I remember really enjoying. He was on a TV show called Spin City, I think it was.
Oh, of course, Connie Britton as well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that show.
And they replaced him with Charlie Sheen, didn't they? When his Parkinson's got so bad.
Of course,
a lot of the scenes in Spin City, he was basically hiding his hand in his pocket. So for those who don't know, like Michael J. Fox got diagnosed in the mid-90s when his career, well, it might have even been the late 80s, his career was huge. Got diagnosed with, basically started noticing his hand shaking, got diagnosed with Parkinson's, and he still wanted to earn money to support his family and everything else, so carried on doing Spin City without telling anyone else. A lot of scenes he was really struggling, had to sort of hide his hand in his pocket. Eventually came out and told everyone, so not only his sort of castmates but essentially the world, and stepped away from the show because he didn't feel they could do it justice, and they replaced him with Charlie Sheen before his winning meltdown, maybe like 10 years later.
When I was first commuting to London, I got bought Lucky Man, which is a book by Michael J. Fox, which is this one was written, so it's basically in kind of his rise to fame, and then it goes into his Parkinson's, but it's a really interesting book, a really good autobiography of him and what he goes through and the tics when he first gets them, not understanding it and going through the diagnosis, but then also wanting to carry on acting and being kind of torn between family life and acting and stuff. I'd highly recommend that. And then last year I had laser eye surgery, and I listened to his latest book on an audiobook, No Time Like the Future. By the way, I love how he uses all of these little things in the titles.
Rightly so.
He's done 4 books. So the second one was called Always Looking Up, The Adventures of an Incurable Optimist. So obviously, again, playing on his height. And then the other one, which was a year later, was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Future, Twists and Turns and Lessons Learned.
Oh, wow.
So there you go. And then obviously the one you've read, No Time Like the Future.
And that one is basically is as recent as you can get, and it's the audiobook is actually narrated by him as well, so that really adds something, but it's not really about his career, it's all about his journey at the moment, and obviously he's set up the Michael J. Fox Foundation, so he raises awareness and money for the disease, so I think he's quite an incredible man in that front. But in the same breath, I think what's really kind of charming about him is he often takes a piss out of himself a bit still. Like the Curb
Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah, I was going to say Curbed. And
my favourite joke in that. My favourite moment of the Curb thing where he sends up his Parkinson's is when he hands the can of drink to Larry David, and Larry David opens it and it explodes in his face, and he's like, You shook it up and have this kind of, it's all this, but the beautiful thing about that is he's this, Michael J. Fox is his neighbour. There's all this kind of, it's only a few episodes, but it's so well done. And like you say, it's Michael J. Fox sending up, his Parkinson's.
Can I get you a soda or something, Larry?
Oh, sure, that'd be great. The thing is, Hitler really ruined that mustache for everybody. Because it's an interesting mustache, and now nobody could wear it, Oh, thanks. Oh, Jesus Christ! What the hell?
What?
Did you shake that up on purpose?
Parkinson's.
And like I've got first-hand experience with Parkinson's in that my father's got Parkinson's, was diagnosed in 2008, and steadily he's gotten worse since 2008. So I know it sounds weird, like seeing you see your father go through it, it's like, oh, this is horrible. Seeing Michael J. Fox go through it, there's something. It's hard to put into words. It's not. I suppose it normalizes it to a degree, because maybe that's the wrong thing to say, but it's like, oh, someone famous has got it, and this is how they deal with it in a very public stage. So it you're able to accept it a little easier. I think if Michael J. Fox had got it and hidden from the world and gone, no one can ever see me shaking, and I'm not going to do it.
Which he did try and do at first.
Which he did for initially, but then sensibly it was like, no, the world needs to see me for who I am, and guess what? I can still do things. Unfortunately, Parkinson's is a horrifically degenerative disease, so it will come a time when, he's very much shutting down. It doesn't get better, put it that way, because obviously it's a disease that is still, they don't know what starts it, they don't know how to cure it, they just know how to manage it as best they can. I think when, I'm not saying, him getting it was great, but I just mean that him being so public about it normalizes it to a degree. And it's like, well, if someone, that kind of public figure, one of the most famous people in the world at one point, can, normalize it and like you say, do great work with his foundation, everything, then it's like, then anybody can deal with it. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, like you say, I remember he was watching the closing ceremony for the, I think it was the 2010 Winter Olympics. I was big into that Olympics. It was a great time. I think that was the one that was held in Canada, and the closing
Vancouver.
Vancouver, yes. And the closing ceremony, from what I can remember, was one of the most hilarious things, where they had I think it was Michael Bublé did the singing, and they
just
had
anyone Canadian.
William Shatner, who I think is Canadian, was there as well, and Michael J. Fox, and they were all just kind of sending themselves up as Canadians. It was one of the best ceremonies I've ever seen, because you think of closing ceremonies, it's all very 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 celebratory, self-congratulatory. This was a complete they send up lumberjacks and maple leaves everywhere. It was hilarious, but it was so. If you ever get a chance, that's a good thing. If you get a chance to watch the closing ceremony from the Winter Olympics 2010, watch it, because it is. I still remember it to this day. It was hilarious, and Michael J. Fox was there, and he clearly had those tics and the movements, and it's so funny as seeing someone like I say, my father who's got Parkinson's, and you go back and watch certain interviews with him before maybe it was public, or like Nige says in Spin City, and you go, oh yeah, you pick up on those things, and obviously that's hindsight, but it is fascinating to watch. And like I say, I think it's odd in the sense of he had this big career in the 80s, less so in the 90s. We haven't mentioned Stuart Little. He obviously
voiced for that, which was a big film. So it
was a big film,
and clearly was designed at the time for him to do something where he could do the voice acting. He didn't have to be on screen. He didn't have to worry about it. And he also did Atlantis as well around the same time.
That's right,
the Lost
for
Empire.
Don Bluth Studios. Yeah, he and that's the thing. I do wonder if I don't mean to sound awful, if his star had already fallen come the 90s. Like, you know, when you look at The Frighteners, we all enjoyed it, but it wasn't exactly like, it's a Michael J. Fox film like Teen Wolf or Back to the Future. And I just wonder if...
It definitely did. I think there was a big drop-off, like, in terms of the quality of his films. He was in Mars Attacks, but it was a very small role.
Very small role,
if you remember that.
Yeah.
And then between Stuart Little and we mentioned, obviously, Atlantis, he did not make a film between... basically 2005 and 2013, and most of the films between 99 and 2005 were just Stuart Little films. So there was,
oh wow!
So it got to that point
because obviously he started in TV. He's always kind of gone back to TV in some way. Obviously, Family Ties was. I mean, it wasn't very big here, but I think it was pretty big.
No, but it was huge
in
huge
the States.
Well, and like he won Golden Globes and Emmys as well. Like there was obviously for Family Ties. I think the last one he won was in 1989, and then by 98 he'd kind of won again for Spin City. But yeah,
he's always kind of navigated his way back to TV in amongst his whole career, really, hasn't he? There was one film that we haven't really talked about that was, for me, like so against type, and not just that, but it was Casualties of War, which is the Brian De Palma film,
which was after Back to the Future, but before Back to the Future 2.
Yeah,
so it was kind of
very weird
in that little bubble.
But I mean, I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time, to be honest, but from my recollection, it's a very hard watch. But
Hey, Sarge, you got to give me a minute here on this thing we're doing. I don't want nothing but charming people around me on this one, gentlemen. So bring your good luck stuff.
Like this, Sarge?
This is nuts. We ain't supposed to be doing this.
Everybody else is up for this.
This is kidnapping, ain't it, Sarge?
Be advised, you best just relax and try to forget about this thing. Is that clear?
Yeah, you got a weapon. We all got weapons. Anybody can blow anybody away, which is the way it ought to be. Always.
Sean Penn's unbelievable in that film. He's such an arsehole. It is based on a true story as well. Essentially, for those who haven't seen it, it's Michael J. Fox's character is a Vietnam veteran who's kind of having flashbacks of his time in Nam, where his squad basically kidnap and rape this poor Vietnamese woman, and he's trying to defend her against a squad that's not that far away from sort of killing him, and it sort of in the end she gets brutalized, and it's really tough watch, and it's kind of, it very much falls into that period of films. Like it's obviously going to get compared to the likes of Platoon and Full Metal Jacket, but it definitely stands up. And again, it was a film of real different career path for him, and he's good in it. He's really
he is
good.
It really tests him and his acting credentials, because like we've said in a lot of the other films, they're pretty much the same character. In this, it's probably the only film that you can see on that list where it's really, you know, he's really chosen that role, or the role's chosen him, and it's definitely worth a watch. But like you say, a hard watch. Be in the right mood for that one.
It's funny, like I think, you know, when you know the history books are written and everything about Hollywood film, I think he will go down as a notable actor in the 80s, and I think that's right.
I think he's always only ever going to be seen, a bit like Del Boy, he's going to ever be seen as Marty McFly, because, you know, Back to the Future is, you know, one of the biggest franchises, and still, like, people love that film. Like,
I made a musical of it a few years ago. That's, you know, like you say, you've saw him.
So people see him as Marty McFly. They don't even see him as Michael J. Fox. And much like, you know, David Jason with Del Boy, it's almost like this character he can't shake in a lot of good ways, because, you know, like he loves that character. He's done The Game. He did the Universal Studios. He obviously like did a little acting role in that, and, you know, he's kind of even come back in a music video a couple of years ago as well.
Well, him and Christopher Lloyd got together quite recently. They're selling like some Back to the Future merchandise as well, and I think a lot of the money from that is potentially going to his charity as well. So and those two, like Christopher Lloyd was in an episode of Spin City as well, and they did a nudge wink wink to Back to the Future as part of that as well.
This is like stepping back in time.
The past is prologue, Michael. Men like us have to keep looking to the future.
What the hell are you talking about?
I've got a real soft spot for like his early 90s films. I mentioned those when he signed that contract. So for me, like The Hard Way, a film he did with James Woods, is absolutely brilliant. It's essentially Michael J. Fox plays like a spoilt movie star, like a brat essentially, who teams up with James Woods' hard-nosed cop. So it's like a classic sort of cop buddy story, and goes out with him, and it's basically just those two, their dynamic, and it's just a really fun watch, a bit of action as well. Doc Hollywood, which is a little bit of a cult classic, I would say.
I used to love that. I mean, it'd be interesting to watch that again now and see how dated it is. But
yeah, it pops up on like your Film 4s or maybe like your ITV 3s or whatever it is. It occasionally comes up on TV, and I always get myself sort of drawn back into it. Another film he did for Love or Money that was called Concierge in America is quite an interesting film where Gabrielle Anwar's in it, and you may remember her as the sort of woman who dances with Al Pacino's character in Scent of a Woman. That's like basically made her career, and she went on to do the sort of Disney Three Musketeers with like Chris O'Donnell. She was in Burn Notice, a TV show, quite recently, and also did a remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers in the 90s, which is surprisingly not that bad. But yeah, he in this film, he plays a concierge who's basically trying to scrape all his money together to build his like dream hotel. And again, for Love or Money, eventually he kind of ends up falling in love with Gabrielle Anwar's character, and it's a bit of a throwaway film, but he's so good in it, and it's so charming, and she's really good in it, and it's just a really nice watch. And then to kind of finish off that period, I would say Greedy, a film he did sort of the mid-90s, had a really, really stellar cast. He plays like a bowler, essentially, whose wrist goes. It kind of ties into the problems he was having with Parkinson at the time. I don't know whether that was subconsciously or what, but his family, what's the word? It's not matriarch. What's the male version? I can't. Patriarch, thank you very much, is played by
you were close.
Played by Kirk Douglas, who is absolutely brilliant, who's basically absolutely minted, and all his family is basically squabbling over the money that he's got. It's got like Phil Hartman in as well from like The Simpsons, Ed Begley Jr., who's most recently been in like Better Call Saul. And it's just a brilliant film of just this family trying to like kill each other to basically get this money, and he's just brilliant in that as like the little nephew sort of comes back into the picture, and everyone's trying to monopolize into a certain way. Some of those films are probably better than they have any right to be, but maybe it's just my undying love for Michael J. Fox that makes them better than they actually are. Who knows?
Do you fancy sending us a film to review, or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
Here's a couple of questions for you then. So I didn't ask what your favourite Michael J. Fox film is, because I'm guessing you're probably going to all say Back to the Future.
Well, if you go back to our 80s podcast, you'll find that for both me and Smith, it features very, very prominently in our favourite films from the 1980s. So.
Yeah, so we do talk about, if you're interested in hearing a bit more about Back to the Future, go back to our top 5 films of the 80s, because I think we talk about it twice. So I did ask you guys, like, what do you think's his best performance? Etok, what favourite performance of his?
I'm torn to a degree because I really, really enjoyed The Frighteners, but it's going to have to be Back to the Future because it is one of those roles that, you know, when you think, we did talk about, you know, Eric Stoltz was originally going to be cast in that role.
Right, he was. When you think about that,
they actually shot a lot of the film, didn't they?
And obviously they always go, he's in one scene, and it's like, oh yeah, the back of him is in one scene, Eric Stoltz. But it is nuts when you think about that role, and I think this is why it is his best performance, because you think of Eric Stoltz in that role, it's like, nah, that doesn't work. If he had been in it, it may have worked. You know what I mean? But the fact that Michael J. Fox took that role, made it his own, and it defined kind of what roles he was hired for after that. As like you say, it's Michael J. Fox kind of playing the nice guy, the lovable guy, the cheeky scamp or whatever. I think there's a reason for that, and it's because it's like his defining role, Marty McFly, Back to the Future.
Best performance, Nige?
he's very good in Casualties of War. As I mentioned, those kind of that mid-90s runs, The Hardware, I really enjoy. I really like Doc Hollywood, For Love or Money as well. But it is Back to the Future. He can't escape it, can he? Really, as Etok just sort of said, it's the film that will define him. It's the film when, God forbid, he passes away. Back to the Future's Michael J. Fox has passed away. There is no escape for him, and that's just a testament to not only how good the film is, but how good he is in that film.
Yeah, I mean, I think Casualties of War is one of those films that really kind of surprises you because it is so against type, and I think because of that kind of degree of acting that he has to do in that, it's hard not to kind of bypass that film as one of his best performances, in my opinion. But yeah, like you guys, I mean, Back to the Future, it wouldn't be Back to the Future without Michael J. Fox, as we know, like you just said, with the original casting. So he's just so superb in all three of those films, and he kind of makes them, him and Christopher Lloyd are pivotal to how great those films are.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But your kids are gonna love it.
Okay, so underrated film, I'll kick us off. So it's weird hearing some of the films you've talked about. I realised that I hadn't actually seen as many as I thought. but there's quite a few that you were just talking about in the 90s that I haven't seen. But yeah, I think for me, the most underrated Michael J. Fox film is The Frighteners. I think it's one of those films that really surprised me at the time, and I only watched it because he was in it. But it is genuinely just a really good, fun film, and I don't think it gets much praise, and maybe it is a bit of a cult film that certain people will like, but I just really enjoyed that film.
Yeah, same here. Frighteners again. It was literally like the two, because it is, The Frighteners is a really bloody good film. I've seen it twice, once at cinema, once at home, enjoyed it both times, and yet it's a film that if you say to people, what about The Frighteners? They go, they either haven't seen it or they saw it a long time ago, or there's the other option, which is like us, which is, really, really bloody enjoyed that film. Would love to see it again.
Yeah. Some of the ones I mentioned a minute ago, like The Hardware especially, big fan of. I do think that's very underrated. Greedy is just a really good film. It's worth a watch. Did The American President, where he kind of had a bit of a bit part role in it with Michael Douglas. It's worth a watch as well. And you said The Frighteners is a good film. And have you heard of a film called Back to the Future? He's quite good in that. Right. It's a bit underrated because it's just that good. But and I really do have that soft spot for Love or Money, and it's a sort of film that I imagine will never ever come on TV again. Probably isn't on Netflix or anything like that, but maybe I was just in love with Gabrielle Anwar at the time as well, so it's like the perfect combination of Michael J. Fox being extremely charming and her just being incredible, so check that out as well.
He one was your underrated?
All of them. Every film he's done that isn't Back to the Future is underrated as far as I'm concerned.
Fair enough. He is one last thing to point out, actually, is actually in a new documentary called Still, which is on Apple TV, which is, obviously a self-look at his Parkinson's disease and, a bit more in depth about that, but which has just come out, which I'll be interested to see. I always find he's so honest with all of that, and I think that's really endearing to him, and also kind of the kind of actor he is, or was, I should say, a very physical actor, always running, jumping, dancing. It's kind of like that horrible irony that this horrible disease can't let him do those kind of physical roles, and obviously he's retired from acting now anyway, but yeah.
You mentioned, obviously, him going through this disease, but he really, really did take that step back for his family. Now, he met his wife when they were filming Family Ties. She was on that. So they've been together for, 30-odd years? Maybe even 40 years, which is a real testament to kind of his character. And I think,
especially what he's gone through, and he's got 4 kids as well.
And her as well, to be so incredibly supportive through all that time. I think when he was first got to LA, he was a little bit of a player, good-looking guy, had that charm, had that humour. But yeah, I think he's someone that a lot of people can... I think he makes the joke himself. He's the sort of person you could look up to, but not physically because he's a short guy. But I'm just a massive fan of Michael J. Fox. I think there is a nice little catalogue of films that people should go and check out, and you have a little chuckle, and the charm just shines through in all of them. So yeah, to Michael J. Fox, really.
Get your meat hooks off of me.
You heard her. She said, get your meat hooks off.
And guys, get in touch. What's your favourite? What's your favourite that isn't Back to the Future? Get in touch. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. We're on YouTube in the description down below, and Facebook. Check us out and give us another actor, actress, writer, director to talk about next time, or a film, and we'll see you then. We need your help. We are looking to grow Off Radar and release more and more high quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.